As I note here, the best way to know how to demonstrate how Scala for expressions work is for us to build our own custom collection class. To keep things simple, I'm going to just create our custom class as a wrapper around an existing Scala collection class. And that's because I just want you to focus on how to write map, flatMap, withFilter, and foreach methods. I don't want to worry about the internals of trying to organize something like a sequence class. We'll just hide that detail. And again, I just want to focus on writing these four methods inside the sequence class. So when I say a sequence class, I mean literally that I want to create a class named sequence, and I want to be able to use it in these ways here. So I want to be able to create a sequence of strings, a sequence of int, a sequence of person, etc. And you know from past videos that this means that sequence is going to be able to contain a generic type because I'm using strings here, int here, and person here. And also, given those lines of code, you can infer some initial requirements about the sequence class. And this first line is a little dated. It said that sequence needs to be a case class or needs to have a companion object in the apply method. And that was because I'm not using the new keyword. And again, this went away with Scala 3. So this is pretty much just a Scala 2 comment at this point. As I mentioned, because the class will be used as a container for generic elements, I'm going to define it to take a generic type. And because sequence instances can be created with a variable number of initial elements, the sequence class constructor, which you see being used in all these examples, will need to be defined to accept a varargs parameter. So you want to keep those last couple of points in mind. And again, this was the case class discussion right here. What I want to do over here is just take a look. So I have sequence here is an empty file. And we can say, how about Scala CLI compile that file and watch. And there's nothing in that file yet, so that's all we have so far. And what I mean in the discussion over here, so if we go back to look at those examples right here, we know so far that I want to create a case class. I'm going to name it sequence. And technically, this doesn't have to be a case class, but I'm going to go ahead and create it as one. And as you see in these examples, this is going to take a generic type parameter. So what we know from that is I'm going to call that generic type parameter A, and then it's going to have a constructor here, and then the body of the class will be inside of here. So we'll come back to the body in just a moment. As I mentioned here, you see this one has two parameters. This one takes 5, this one takes 3. In the constructor, we want to take a varargs parameter, and that's so that we can handle construction like that. And the way we do that in Scala is this way right here. So that actually works just fine. So I'm going to say initial elements, and these are going to have that type A. And if it's simpler, I've mentioned this before, if it's simpler, if you have a problem using generics, if it's simpler, sometimes you can start off and just say, I want this to be an int like that. And then the star right there is the one that makes this a varargs parameter right here. So this star after the int means that this variable here can have a variable number of values when it's created. And again, I created that as an int if that's a little bit easier, but we really want that to be a generic. So I'll go back to making that an A there and there. And so far, so good. I'll save that and we'll see that it compiles. I can probably move that down a little bit there and move this up a little bit here. And as we scroll here, so as I mentioned, I want to have this class being backed by a Scala collection class. And that's just because I don't want to get into everything that's involved in writing a sequence type of class. So what I'm going to do is just say, I want to import scala.collection.mutable, .mutable. And I am going to use array buffer here. And let me just fill that in and do that. So I'm going to use array buffer to back this. And as you notice here, I'm passing in the A here. So what this means is that the array buffer inside of our sequence is going to have the same type or contain the same type that our sequence class takes. So if this is an int up here, that means that it's going to be an array buffer of int right there. And as I note here, this is a book. Don't do this at home. And I should also mention that in a future course, we're going to create an entire linked list class from scratch. We're going to do all this stuff with generic types, and we're going to implement all these methods. So fear not, I'm not going to do that now, but we are going to do that later when we develop that linked list. So right now, I just want to keep going along this line. And what I want to say here is I am going to have a parameter here like that one. So I am going to say private val elements equals a new array buffer. and I want to construct it like that. This is actually a mistake here. I forgot I'm just doing the import right here. So that's all I need for the import there. And then what I'm saying here is let's create a new array buffer instance right there. That's what this means right there, is these parentheses are the empty constructor for this. And this is just like saying that, except in Scala 3, we don't need to do that anymore. So I'll get rid of that. You can keep the new in there if you like it. And then elms or elms inside of here is a private field, so nobody outside of our class can see that. And then the only other thing I want to do at this point is just say, well, I want to initialize that with the initial elements that we are given up here in the constructor. So whatever is passed in as a var args parameter here, I want to add all of those to our private elements variable right there like that. And again, recall that when I scroll back here, sequence can have a variable number of parameters when it's created. So it could have 2 or all these or any of these over here. So that's what that's doing right there. And then this line right here says add all of those parameters to our array buffer right here. Let's see, what else can I tell you about this? So if you're not familiar with the plus plus equal method, this line of code right here that I have, that very last line of code, which I show right here, works just like this for loop. So it's just like saying for every element in the initial elements, add that element to the array buffer value right here like that. So that's what happens right there. I was going to say, if I save that, you'll see that it still compiles, but it doesn't compile because I forgot the colon character right there. So let's go ahead and put that in there. And there we go. And now one way we can also test this is I'll kill that right there. Let's start a REPL. And I want to copy and paste this over here. So we will do that. I want to copy that and paste that in. Then we can say something like val x of s equals a sequence. And we can pass in some values. Let me just scoot that up slightly. So we'll just pass in some integer values there. And you can see from the REPL output here that it seems to be working just fine. And then I could say, well, how about val y of s equals a sequence of something else, like a string or something like that. So a sequence of strings would be A, then B, and something like CCC. And indeed, that seems to be working as well. So far, so good. We seem to have a working sequence class. And that's as far as I take it in this lesson. And what we're going to start to do now that we have this to build on is we're going to start adding methods to the sequence class. We're going to start adding that foreach method, the map method, flatMap, and so on to make this class work inside of a for expression.